Hi, everybody. Hello, my Seacrest friends. It's great to see you all, and I'm happy to be with you as always. I thought that in the midst of these very precarious and challenging times, that we need to add a little beauty to our lives, and so I think that one of the ways to do that is through music. And I thought today that I would introduce you to three of my favorite pieces of music, and all of them Hebrew music from the land of Israel. Two of them by one particular female songwriter and singer, and the other one, which is, you'll see in just a minute. So, Israel as a modern country is still quite young. They're only 70 years old, 72 years old. And so they don't have the kind of historical memory of music like a country such as the United States, with varying modes of music, or certainly some of the African nations, the Western European countries that have long histories of hundreds of years of opera and classical music and so on. So Israeli music is kind of uh, a subject unto itself. I'm not speaking here of liturgical music that is sung in synagogues as part of worship services. I'm really referring to the kind of music that was written in more modern times, since the founding of the State of Israel, or perhaps shortly before that. And so we see all kinds of genres, everything from, of course, classical to rock, to folk, to country, to reggae. Some of these different modes borrowed obviously from other cultures, but Israel is a melting pot. When you go to Israel now, you find people who have not only come to visit from all over the world, but certainly have come to live from all over the world. People of different ethnicities and races and so on. So, very much like America, which is a land of immigrants, these various types of music have come and had their influence on the people, and not just from other countries, but from Jewish traditions in other countries. Yemenite music and Moroccan music are nothing like modern Israeli folk tunes, or the kind of music you hear for Israeli folk dances. We hear Arab influence, we hear African influence, we hear influence from countries all over the world. And so, just as Israel is a melting pot of nationalities, so is their music kind of a melting pot as well. And when you go to Israel nowadays, if you go into a store that sells CDs, or you get on Amazon Music or any of the other music sites, you can find such an enormous variety of music coming out of Israel by Israeli singers, songwriters, composers, and so on. So, I'd like to introduce you to, although you probably already know these pieces, three songs that I happen to love. And the first two are by the same person, and that is Naomi Shemer, or Naomi Shemer in the Hebrew. She was a leading Israeli musician and songwriter, and she was hailed as the first lady of Israeli song and poetry. She was born in 1930. She died in 2004. Her death was mourned nationally by Israelis. She was such an important, integral figure to the state of Israel. She was born, her actual name, her actual birth name was not Shemer, it was Sapir. Sapir, which is a form of Shapiro. And she was born in Kvutzat Kinneret, which was an Israeli kibbutz that her parents had founded. Her parents, Rivka and Meyer Sapir, right along the shores of the Galilee. And for those of you who have been to Israel, that part of Israel is absolutely gorgeous. If I were to have been born in Israel and died in Israel, that's where I would want to be born and die, because the Galil, the Galilee, is just exquisite. So she was born in the 1930s, which means she was born considerably, many years before the founding of the State of Israel. She was 18 when the State of Israel became a state, was declared a nation. And growing up on a kibbutz, of course, is a different kind of experience, because uh, you're living in a communal setting, a farm type setting. I don't know exactly what the kibbutz that she was on, what kind of uh, industry they had, but most likely they were involved in agriculture. And in the 1950s, she served in the Israeli Defense Forces, as did um, all women, starting very early. 1950, of course, was just a couple of years into the birth of the State of Israel. And she was in the Israeli Defense Forces Nahal, which was the entertainment troupe. And of course, our military has entertainment troops too, usually in the form of bands. I knew somebody who played the trumpet in the Marine Corps band, and there's actually more than one Marine Corps band. There are several, because at any given point in time, there may be a half a dozen different military programs going on that they travel to, and so on. So they have to have, actually, he was not in the band, he was in the orchestra. He played classical trumpet. And I remember when he was first applying to be in the Marines and then auditioning, it was a tremendous process. They didn't just take him in because he played band in high school. He had to go through a series of very um, difficult auditions. So she studied music. She was in this entertainment troupe. She studied music at the Reuben Academy in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv with Paul Ben Chaim and Abel Ehrlich, Ilona Vince Krauss, and Yosef Tal. All of these were singers, composers, and musicians in the early years of the State of Israel. And she did her own singing and songwriting and composing. Um, she set some famous poems to music, such as those of the Israeli poet Rachel and even the American poet Walt Whitman. And she translated and adapted popular songs into Hebrew, such as the Beatles song Let It Be. So she was a very prolific writer, singer-songwriter, and in 1963 she composed a song which has become just incredibly famous, at least in terms of Jewish songs, and it is called Hurshat HaEucalyptus, the Eucalyptus Grove, and it's about the eucalyptus trees in the Kinneret, which is the Hebrew word for the Galilee, and the aroma of the songs, um, and then she wrote a couple of other songs that you know quite well, which we're going to get to in just a moment. Um, she wrote for the Israeli Music Festival, and after Israel's victory in the Six-Day War, she added another verse to this particular song that you all know, celebrating the reunification of Jerusalem. Have you got it yet? Yerushalayim Shel Zachav. And the song gained such huge status that it was considered like a second national anthem, second only to Hatikva in Israel. She was married and a couple of times. She married an actor whose name was Gidon or Gideon Shemer. That's where the Shemer came from. and she had a daughter, Lali. And later on, they were divorced, and she also married an attorney whose name was Mordechai Horowitz, which sounds more like a composer than an attorney. And the two of them had a son whose name is Ariel Horowitz, who also became a musician. She died in 2004 of cancer at age 73. And shortly before her death, she wrote to a friend saying that she had used a Basque melody as the basis for her 1967 anthem, Jerusalem of Gold, Yerushalayim Shel Zachav. And she'd always evidently denied it before. I mean, it wasn't an obvious lifting of the song, but they decided to publish the account. And so before her death, she came clean and said that the influence for Yerushalayim Shel Zachav was this Basque folk melody, which probably had no words to it. In 1962, there was a singer by the name of Paco Ibanez who performed the Basque melody in Israel, and they think that's where she may have heard the melody, and then used the basis of the melody for Yerushalayim Shel Zachav. She was buried in the cemetery at Kvutzat Kinneret, which was, of course, her place of birth. And alongside her are buried many of the socialist ideologues and the pioneers of the second and third chalutzim, which were the second and third waves of immigration. And she's buried near the famous Israeli poet Rachel, which was something that she had requested. She did receive a number of prizes. I've looked at her list of lyrics and songs that she wrote, and it is quite astounding. And in 1983, she received the Israel Prize for Hebrew Song, both words and melody. So I want to show you a couple of pictures because I think she was a stunningly beautiful woman, not only as a young woman, but as a woman later in life as well. Although the second picture, I really don't know how old she was when it was taken, but she looks to be maybe in her 50s or early 60s. So this is Naomi Shemer as a young woman. She's writing in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, and she could look like any folk singer in America. The Mamas and the Papas. She could look like Joni Mitchell, or somebody who might sing with Peter, Paul, and Mary. She's just kind of got that Woodstocky type look. And she wasn't, she was to a certain degree part of that generation, even though she was born in 1930. Living on a kibbutz is an experience, living in nature and so on. Here she is as a woman. I don't know the date of this photograph, as I said, but she looks to be in probably her 50s here. When I was in Israel, I was so fortunate that part of the trip that I've been there several times, but part of the trip that I took in late January, early February, we did go to the Galilee, and we went to the cemetery in the Kinneret in the Galilee, where all these famous people are buried. Her husband, Mordechai Horowitz, is buried next to her. He died on the 21st of May in 2010. So he died after her by about 6 years. But this is her grave, and I hope you could see from this photograph, I think that it is quite beautiful. You could see at the top is her name, Naomi Shemer, and it's written in it's her signature, it's her handwriting. with a beautiful little flower. And as you can see, the grave is a typical kind of a grave in Israel, which is raised up to look like a bed. And if you've ever seen photographs of the Israeli military cemeteries, very similar, although those are all absolutely identical, covered with grass and quite beautiful. And if you can see all the stones on her grave, it's a place where pilgrims who come to Israel come to visit her grave because she was such an influential and magnificent songwriter. So, um, while looking for Yerushalayim Shel Zachav, Jerusalem of Gold, I found so many different versions of it that I was kind of shocked, but you really shouldn't be. Um, and she chose somebody to sing the song for the first time when it was um, first performed, and his name was Shuli Natan, and it was the 15th of May, 1967, the night after Israel's 19th Independence Day, and he was an unknown, but she chose him to sing it. And at that time, in 1967, you know that the old city in Jerusalem was still controlled by the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. The Hashemite kingdom is the kingdom from which the current king of Jordan and his father are part. And Israel was living under their occupying rule, and Jews had been banned from the old city and the rest of East Jerusalem. They'd lost their homes and possessions, and they'd become refugees, and many of the holy sites were desecrated and damaged during that period. And only 3 weeks after the song was published, the Six-Day War broke out, and the song became this morale boosting kind of a battle anthem of the Israel Defense Forces. And Naomi Shemer herself sang the song for the troops before the war and the festival. And so they were among the first in the world to hear it. But its first national performance was done by Shuli Natan. On June 7th, 1967, the Israel Defense Forces finally recaptured East Jerusalem and the Old City from the Jordanians. And Shemer, was about to perform for a troop of paratroopers who weren't engaged in combat at that moment. And when she heard that the Western Wall and the Temple Mount were in the hands of the Israeli army, she quickly wrote a new verse, and she modified the second verse. So instead of the words, "Alas, the old city is empty and we cannot visit the Temple Mount," instead she wrote, "We have returned to the Shuk," which is the open air market. "The shofar is sounding at the Temple Mount," thereby letting these paratroopers for whom she was performing know that the wall and the Temple Mount had been recaptured. And so she didn't intend, evidently, for that verse to replace the other verse, but it has remained part of the song. So why Jerusalem of Gold? Well, if you've ever been to Israel and you've ever spent any time in Jerusalem, you know that most of it is built of this gorgeous stone called Jerusalem stone, and it is gold. It is gold, and depending upon which way, where the sun is in the sky, it could be shining light gold or darker gold or iridescent gold. It's absolutely gorgeous, and of course, she used that as the theme. She was well versed in the poetry of other Israeli poets, such as um, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, and others, and intersperse some of their words, not as full lyrics, but just as reference to some of these others who had been founders of the state of Israel. Needless to say, a song that famous is going to be used in lots of films and so on and so forth. Some of that has been met with some controversy. It was in a 1991 film about the Six-Day War, and it was done by a very popular rock band called the Scorpions. A Greek singer sang it. The jam band Fish performed it. Some of you may have heard of Fish. It's an American group. A Brazilian singer-songwriter covered it. And I came across one recording. I don't remember the number, but it's called the 523 Boys. And I have to look it up to find out what those numbers have to do with anything. But it is a hard rock, almost a metal, heavy metal version, which I didn't really like. Some heavy metal music I can tolerate, but this was, I don't know, hearing Yerushalayim Shel Zachav sung in that way was just not what I expected. The song has been translated loosely into many, many languages. It was chosen as Song of the Year in Israel in 1967 and Song of the Jubilee on Israel's Independence Day in 1998. And just to tell you how broad an influence this song has had, it is the core song of the La Crosse, Wisconsin Blue Stars Drum and Bugle Corps. And evidently the corps sings it before every competition, which I just think is hysterical, because you do not think of a Hebrew song being sung by a drum and bugle corps from La Crosse, Wisconsin. Just doesn't make, maybe 100 bottles of beer on the wall, but not Yerushalayim Shel Zachav. There has been some controversy surrounding the song. In 1993, when Schindler's List came out, it played near the end of the film. And that caused some controversy because the song is really considered to be kind of an informal Israeli national anthem. Just like, we have the Star Spangled Banner, but we also have America the Beautiful, which is kind of like an unofficial second national anthem. Well, the song is really Yerushalayim Shel Zachav is really more of an informal national anthem, but it was written really for the victory after the Six-Day War. It has no relationship whatsoever with the subject matter of the Holocaust, which was the subject matter, of course, of Schindler's List. And so the song is not associated with the Holocaust. And so it did create some controversy in that respect. Okay, so now I'm going to shut up and I'm going to play it for you. And hopefully you will be able to enjoy. Just close your eyes and listen to, and by the way, this is Naomi Shemer singing this herself. Let me get it here. Yerushalayim Shel Zachav. Give me 1 minute. I'm trying to find the actual song. Here we go. And this is her playing piano as well.
נישא ברוח הר הבית עם כל פעמונים ובתרדמה אילן באבן שבויה בחלומה העיר אשר בגד יושבת ובליבה חומה ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור הלא לכל שירייך אגידו ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור הלא לכל שירייך אגידו היכן משובורות המים כיכר השוק ריקה ואין פוקדת הר הבית בעיר העתיקה ובמערות אשר בסלע ביערות רוחות בין יורד אל ים המלח בטרף יריחו ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור אך בבואי היום לשיר לך ולך לקשור פתרים קטונתי מצעיר בנייך ובאחרון המשוררים כי שמך צורבת השפתיים היא נשיקת שרף אם אשכחך ירושלים אשר כולה זהב ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור הלא לכל שירייך אני
Quite beautiful, isn't it? Oops. Sorry about that. So when you hear her sing it, it's really striking because she wrote the song. And so when you hear Naomi Shemer sing it, it's being sung the way it was intended to be sung. And you can even hear the piano. She must be playing on some kind of an older, I'm not going to call it a rinky-dink piano, but it is terribly out of tune. And it just didn't seem to matter because and by the way, this is actually off one of her recorded albums. So this is not her just sitting at some party somewhere, plunking it on the piano and playing it. This was actually recorded for an album which was produced and sold. So it's wonderful listening to the piano and how really out of tune that it is. Like most Israelis, she was well versed in Tanakh, in Hebrew Bible. And there are scattered throughout the lyrics, and I picked up one in particular, which says, Im eshkachech Yerushalayim, which is, if I shall forget you, if I should ever forget you, Jerusalem, which is from Echa, the book of Lamentations. So, clearly she knew her stuff. She knew her Bible, which is not unusual for Jews growing up in the Chalutz, in the early waves of the settlements in Palestine. And again, she was born in 1930, so she was already in the third or the fourth wave of the Chalutzim, of the settlers, who really started coming around the middle of the 19th century. So she was early 20th century. But it was uh, quite a beautiful piece. There's another piece that she wrote that I happen to love, and I don't know, when I first lived in Israel, it would bring me to tears a lot. I'm not sure why, but I just love the melody. And the name of this song is Al Kol Ele. Al Kol Ele. And what that means is, let me get my all my translations for you. It means for all these things, about all these things. And she writes the song about the things that she loves about Israel. So I want to read some of these lyrics to you, just to give you a sense of how she saw her world and the milieu in which she was living. Al hadvash va'al ha'oketz va'al hamar v'hamatok. So this is, every bee that brings the honey needs a sting to be complete. And we all must learn to taste the bitter with the sweet. Keep, O Lord, the fire burning through the night and through the day, for the man who is returning from so far away. And then we have the chorus for all these things. Don't uproot what has been planted, so our bounty may increase. Let our dearest wish be granted. Bring us peace. Oh, bring us peace. I don't think there's an Israeli song or a Jewish song that's ever been written that doesn't use the word shalom in it somewhere. This prayer for peace has been the prayer from the heart of Jews eternally. For the sake of all these things, Lord, let your mercy be complete. Bless the sting and bless the honey. Bless the bitter and the sweet. And that's the chorus. Al kol ele, al kol ele. You'll hear it in a minute. Save the houses that we live in, the small fences and the wall, from the sudden warlike thunder. May you save them all. Guard what little I've been given. Guard the hill my child might climb. Let the fruit that's yet to ripen not be plucked before its time. As the wind makes rustling night sounds and the star falls in its arc, all my dreams and my desires form crystal shapes out of the dark. Guard me, O Lord, these treasures. All my friends keep safe and strong. Guard the stillness, guard the weeping, and above all, guard this song. And the chorus, of course, is interspersed throughout these verses. And finally, the chorus again. For the sake of all these things, Lord, let your mercy be complete. Bless the sting and bless the honey. Bless the bitter and the sweet. Bless the sting and bless the honey. Bless the bitter and the sweet. And I think right now, those of us living in these particularly precarious times have to think seriously about that we wouldn't know how sweet the honey was without the sharpness of the sting. And at the same time, without the sting, we wouldn't know the wonderful taste of the honey. So it takes both these ends of the continuum for us to understand life's goodness and life's challenges, life's sting and life's sweetness. So I'm going to find Al Kol Ela for you. And this one is not being sung by Naomi Shemer. This one is being sung by Dudu Fisher, who is a popular singer. And let me find, a lot of these albums look alike. They look as if they're all the same songs. So here is Dudu, and Dudu is a nickname for David. And if I could write the Hebrew out for you, you'd understand why. And here he is singing Al Kol Ele.
על הדבש ועל העוקץ, על המר והמתוק, על ביתנו התינוקת, שמורי לי הטוב, על האש המבוערת, על המים הזכים, על האיש השב הביתה מן המרחקים, על כל אלה,
על כל אלה,
שמונה לי
אלוהי הטוב, על הדבש ועל העוקץ, על המר והמתוק. The sting and the sweet. אל תשכח את התקווה.
השיבני ואשובה אל הארץ הטובה. שמורי לי על זה הבית, על הגן, על החומה, מיגון מפחד פתע וממלחמה. שמור על המעט שיש לי, על האור ועל הכף, על הפרי שלא הבשיל עוד ושנאסה. על כל אלה, על כל אלה, שמונה לי אלי הטוב, על הדבש ועל העוקץ, על המר והמתוק, על הרעיון המדוע, אל תשכח את התקווה. השיבני ואשובה אל הארץ
הטובה.
מרשרש אילן ברוח, מרחוק נושר כוכב, משאלות ליבי בחושך נרשמות. עכשיו אנא שמור לי על כל אלה ועל אהובי נפשי, על השקט, על הבכי ועל זה השיר. על כל אלה,
על כל אלה,
שמונה לי אלי הטוב, על הדבש ועל העוקץ, על ההר והמתוק, לא על הכל
What'd you think? Pretty gorgeous, huh? So, it reminds me, it's such an Israeli song. It really is, because when you talk about taking the bitter and the sweet, it also reminds me of the sabra fruit, which is a fruit that grows on a cactus. And you've probably all heard the term sabra, which is a word that is used. It's an Israeli who's a native Israeli, and a lot of people become sabras when they move to Israel. But the fruit is sweet and juicy and luscious on the inside, but on the outside it is prickly and dangerous and has cactus needles and so on. And it is really descriptive of much of what we think about some native Israelis as being, harsh, critical, a little prickly on the outside, but on the inside, their hearts, their souls, and everything about them is as sweet and nourishing as can be. And so, when they talk about both the honey and the sting, it's kind of like the sabra fruit, the sting of the needles from the cactus, and the sweetness, the honey of the fruit inside the sabra fruit. And they actually make liqueur out of it too, which is really, really yummy, especially on ice cream. Okay, I'm going to finish here with the third piece, which I think is incredibly important. And also, is a piece of Israeli music, or a song that we sing in Israel that is very, very important. And that is Hatikva, the hope. It is, this was a 19th century poem, so this predates Al Kol Ela and Yerushalayim Shel Zachav, of course. And it's the national anthem of the state of Israel. The theme of the song is pretty romantic. I don't mean romantic like in a love sense, but romantic in looks at the 2,000-year-old hope of returning to the land of Israel and restoring it and reclaiming it as a free and sovereign nation. The uh, the song, or the lyrics, were written by Naftali Herz Imber, whose middle name is spelled like my last name, Herz, a very common German name, Herz. He was a Jewish poet from what is today an area of the Ukraine, and which was he was a Galicianer, Galicia. It was under Austrian rule. He wrote the first version of the poem in 1877, while he was a guest of a Jewish scholar in Romania. And so the text was written in the late 19th century, and it was originally 9 stanzas. It's a long poem, and most of us who know Hatikva and sing Hatikva don't sing all 9 stanzas. That would be a very long national anthem. Can you imagine singing that before a soccer game, or singing 9 stanzas as the Israeli athletes stand on the podiums for the Olympics? It would take forever. So nowadays, only the first stanza generally is sung, and that's the one with which I'm sure you are all familiar. So actually, Hatikva was around long before it was adopted as a national anthem, because the state of Israel was not declared a sovereign state until 1948, and it was kind of unofficially proclaimed the national anthem. But believe it or not, it didn't become the actual national anthem officially of the state of Israel until 2004. So that's a very long time. I mean, the state of Israel was what, already 52, 56 years old. So it was middle-aged already by the time they officially chose it. And it was sanctioned at that time by the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. And so the melody, which Naftali Hertz Imber did not write, but the melody, believe it or not, comes from a 16th century Italian song that was composed by Giuseppe Cenci around 1600, and its earliest known appearance in print was in a collection of madrigals, which is really strange. Later, it was known in early 17th century Italy, and the melody was very widely known in Renaissance Europe. And the melody was used by a Czech composer in his set of 6 symphonic poems celebrating Bohemia, my homeland. So, and by the Czech composer Smetana. And some of you, I think, know that composer, Smetana. So it's just very interesting, the derivation of this music. And it was also in a poem named after the river that flows through Prague, the Moldau River. So, kind of an interesting history to the music. The music was adapted for Hatikva by Samuel Cohen in 1888, and he himself recalled many years later that he had actually hummed the melody based on a melody that he had heard in Romania, um, a song called The Ox-Driven Cart. So very interesting that the national anthem of the state of Israel, Hatikva, which was not formally named by the Knesset until 2004, has this 16th century history as being a piece of music first written in Italy, known throughout Renaissance Europe, then into Bohemia and Czechoslovakia, and so on. It is written in the minor scale, which is kind of typical for a lot of Jewish music. Um, and it's perceived as kind of a mournful tone because songs written in the minor key are a little more mournful than upbeat. And that's not common in national anthems. Think about the Star Spangled Banner. It couldn't be more of a major key, right? Oh, say, can you see? Sorry, my voice is not great today. And so it is optimistic, and overall it's spiritually uplifting, but the minor key kind of gives it this little sense of melancholy. After all, Hatikva means the hope. And when you're hoping for something, it usually means you don't necessarily have it yet. It's something that you are grasping for possibly in the future. The Israeli national anthem is used in several European sporting events. And in October of 2017, it was actually played at the International Judo Federation. And American composer John Williams, who we all know because he's written music for hundreds of films, hundreds of incredibly well-known films, including E.T. and Star Wars and all kinds of other films, adapted Hatikva in 2005 for the film Munich. And some of you may have seen that film. It was about the Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics, and so who were murdered. And so it has been used in film and sporting events and so on. And I just so happen to have the words here so that I can read you from the translation. And then we're going to end this session today by singing Hatikva. So here is what the words mean in the English. As long as the Jewish spirit is yearning deep in the heart, with eyes turned toward the east, looking toward Zion. Then our hope, the 2,000-year-old hope, will not be lost, to be a free people in our land, the land of Zion and Jerusalem. So that is the first of the 9 stanzas or verses of the poem, which Naftali Herz Imber wrote. And that is what has become the national anthem for the state of Israel. And I'm going to play it right now. And this is being played by the Jewish Starlight Orchestra, who do a lot of Yiddish and klezmer music, but I think you'll enjoy this version. And if you feel so moved, please sing. Nefesh Yehudi Homiya Ufa'ate Mizrach Kadima Penima Nefesh Yehudi I hope you enjoyed the program today. It's always wonderful to listen to music, but introducing you to a little bit of Naomi Shemer with Yerushalayim Shel Zachav and Al Kol Eleh, and listening to Hatikva. I hope that's given you a little sense of hope for yourselves, and that you will maybe walk off humming these songs. And I hope you enjoyed the day. So, lehitraot. I will see you soon. Have a marvelous day. Bye bye.